Richard Morrison stood in the doorway of his guest bedroom, his heart heavy with uncertainty. At 62, he had built an empire in real estate, amassed more wealth than 3 generations could spend, yet here he was, hiding in his own home, about to test the woman he planned to marry. His mother, Eleanor, sat in her wheelchair by the window, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. At 87, she had given him everything: love, values, the strength to build his success. Now, with her memory fading and her body growing frail, it was his turn to care for her. "Are you sure about this, son?" Eleanor had asked him that morning, her blue eyes still sharp with wisdom despite her condition. "I need to know, Mom," Richard had replied softly. "Before I make her my wife, I need to know how she truly sees you. Sees us." His fiancée, Jennifer, was 45, elegant, poised, always impeccably dressed. They had met at a charity gala 18 months ago. She was everything that looked perfect on paper. But Richard had noticed something troubling. Whenever Eleanor needed help, Jennifer would suddenly remember an appointment, a phone call, anything to avoid getting too close. So Richard had arranged this test. He would hide, watch, and see how Jennifer treated his mother when she thought no one important was looking. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Richard slipped into the guest room, leaving the door slightly ajar. He heard Natasha, his housekeeper, answer the door. Natasha Williams was 38, a single mother who had been cleaning his home for 3 years. She wore her orange and white uniform with quiet dignity, her dark skin glowing with an inner warmth that no amount of expensive makeup could replicate. She was kind, hardworking, and always had a gentle word for Eleanor. "Good afternoon, Miss Jennifer," Natasha said warmly. "Yes, hello," Jennifer's voice was cool, dismissive. "Where's Richard?" "Mr. Morrison had an emergency business meeting. He asked if you could spend the afternoon with Mrs. Eleanor. He'll be back by evening." There was a pause. Richard could almost see Jennifer's jaw tightening. "I see. Well, I suppose I can stay for a little while." Richard heard footsteps approaching the living room where Eleanor waited. He positioned himself to see through the crack in the door. "Hello, Eleanor," Jennifer said, her voice notably lacking warmth. She remained standing, checking her phone. Eleanor looked up with a gentle smile. "Jennifer, dear, how lovely to see you. Would you sit with me? The afternoon sun is beautiful today. Actually, I have several calls to make. Very important." Jennifer moved to the far side of the room, keeping her distance. Richard felt his stomach tighten. Eleanor's face showed a flicker of hurt before she composed herself, turning back to the window. An hour passed. Jennifer made her calls, scrolled through her phone, but never once approached Eleanor. When Eleanor accidentally knocked her water glass from the wheelchair side table, the glass shattered on the floor. "Oh dear," Eleanor said softly, looking down at the mess. "I'm so sorry." Jennifer glanced up with visible annoyance. "Natasha!" she called out sharply. "Come clean this up." Natasha appeared quickly, her yellow cleaning gloves already on. "No problem at all, Mrs. Eleanor. Accidents happen." As Natasha knelt to pick up the glass, Jennifer spoke without looking up from her phone. "Make sure you get every piece. I'm wearing open-toed shoes." Richard felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain still, to see this through. Natasha cleaned the glass, then filled a new glass with water and handed it to Eleanor. "Here you are, Mrs. Eleanor. Let me put this where you can reach it more easily." "Thank you, dear," Eleanor said, touching Natasha's hand gently. "You're always so kind." "It's my pleasure," Natasha replied with genuine warmth. Another hour passed. Eleanor began to look uncomfortable, shifting in her wheelchair. "Jennifer," Eleanor said hesitantly, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to use the restroom." Jennifer's face registered disgust. "Can't you wait until Richard gets back? Or maybe that's something the help should handle." Eleanor's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I can't wait much longer." Jennifer stood up, irritated. "Natasha, Mrs. Morrison needs assistance." Natasha appeared again, but this time Richard saw something different in her expression, a quiet determination mixed with compassion. "Of course," Natasha said gently, moving toward Eleanor. But then she turned to Jennifer, her voice still respectful but firm. "Miss Jennifer, Mrs. Eleanor is going to be your mother-in-law. This is family. These are the moments that matter." Jennifer's eyes widened. "Excuse me? I don't think you understand your place here." Natasha stood her ground, her voice calm but unwavering. "My place is to clean houses, yes, but Mrs. Eleanor is a person, a mother, a human being who deserves dignity and love. Money can buy a lot of things, Miss Jennifer, but it can't buy a good heart. That's something we choose." Jennifer's face reddened. "How dare you speak to me like that? When Richard hears about this..." "When Richard hears about what?" Richard stepped out of the guest room, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. Jennifer spun around, her expression shifting rapidly from anger to shock to a forced smile. "Richard, darling, this woman was being completely inappropriate." Richard walked slowly to his mother, kneeling beside her wheelchair and taking her hand. "What I saw, Jennifer, was someone treating my mother with more love and respect in 5 minutes than you've shown her in 18 months. Richard, let me explain." "No." Richard's voice was gentle but final. He looked up at Natasha, who stood quietly, her hands folded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and dignity. "Natasha just taught me something important. She said, A, good heart is something we choose. And you, Jennifer, have shown me your choice." Jennifer's composure crumbled. "Please, Richard, I can change. I'll do better." "I believe you would try," Richard said, standing up. "But not because you want to, only because I'm watching. That's not love, that's performance." He handed her purse to her. "I think it's best if you leave now." After Jennifer departed in a storm of tears and protests, Richard turned to Natasha. She looked worried, probably thinking she'd overstepped and would lose her job. "Natasha," Richard said softly, "thank you. I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn, Mr. Morrison. I couldn't stand by, and you did exactly what you should have done. You showed more character in those few minutes than many people show in a lifetime." He paused, glancing at his mother, who was smiling through her own tears. "You treated my mother not as a burden, but as a person worthy of dignity and love. That's priceless." Eleanor reached out her hand. "Natasha, dear, would you sit with me for a while? I'd love some company, and I think Richard needs a moment." "I'd be honored, Mrs. Eleanor," Natasha said, pulling up a chair beside the wheelchair. Richard watched as Natasha chatted with his mother about her children, her dreams, her life. Eleanor's face glowed with genuine happiness, something he realized he hadn't seen enough of lately. Over the following weeks, something beautiful unfolded. Richard found himself looking forward to the days when Natasha worked, not just because his home was clean, but because the house felt warmer, more alive with her presence. She would spend extra time with Eleanor, not because she was paid to, but because she genuinely cared. Natasha would read to Eleanor, help her with her physical therapy exercises, and listen to her stories about the past. Eleanor began to thrive again, her spirits lifted by this simple, authentic kindness. 6 months later, Richard asked Natasha to have dinner with him. And Eleanor, not as an employee, but as a friend. Natasha hesitated, unsure about crossing that boundary. "Please," Eleanor had said with a knowing smile, "we'd both like you there. That dinner changed everything." As they talked and laughed, Richard realized he had found something more valuable than all his wealth, genuine connection with someone who saw him and his mother as people, not as opportunities. 2 years later, Richard and Natasha married in a small ceremony in his mother's favorite garden. Eleanor, now 89, sat in her wheelchair at the front, tears of joy streaming down her face. Natasha's 3 children stood as part of the wedding party, and Richard had never felt richer. As they exchanged vows, Richard thought about that afternoon when he had hidden to test someone's heart. He had been looking for one thing and found something infinitely better. He had learned that love isn't found in perfection or pedigree. It's found in the quiet moments of kindness when no one important seems to be watching. Because someone important is always watching. We ourselves are watching, and the choices we make when it would be easy to look away define who we truly are. Eleanor lived another 3 beautiful years, cared for by a daughter-in-law who loved her genuinely, and every day, Richard thanked the universe for that broken water glass that revealed the truth and brought him to the person his heart had been searching for all along.